been, by the way. This is me pretending like we're not, that we're not
You care?
starting, even though we are. No, I do care. I figured you were okay, though, because I called you and I was like, hey, can you do a thing? And you were like, well, I broke my leg and my house burned down. I assumed you're doing okay. Allison Sheridan is here with us, everybody. Allison Sheridan, at Podfeet on Twitter, and host of NosillaCast, which you can find out more
Look at
about
him
at
go, girl.
podfeet.com. Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you know how nervous I was about saying, don't say the NosillaCast, because then, and for God's sake, don't say Nozilla. And now I've told you everything that I could have said wrong, but didn't. You're welcome. So this show has evolved. You've been around. This is your third time back on the show.
Yeah, this has turned out to be a really fun show. I don't know if it's just because all my friends are on your show, but I love this show.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very sweet. Here's one thing that I love about you being on this show. I know that you listen to this show, like not just when you're on it. So you're aware of the different features that I've set up. For example, this Friday, and I'm really excited about this. You're doing an album side. Allison Sheridan, by the way, famous for not really being into music, is going to bring us an album side, but that's a few days from now. There's a new feature that I started a few weeks ago called It's News to Blank. Whoever happens to be on, it's news to that person, where basically my goal, Allison, is eventually I will just generate no content for this show at all. So like Monday, you come up with a topic. Friday, you come up with a few songs. If I can figure out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm
It's
sitting
gold.
pretty. Yeah, exactly.
Great.
Exactly. I'm curious, though. I mean, honestly, the real thing is, I know there are things that interest me, but we might not end up hitting something that's interesting to the guest. So we start the week by saying, if you were looking at Apple News, if you were picking the one thing you wanted to talk about, if I said, it's news to Allison Sheridan would say,
Well, apparently at WWDC, and I missed this until I read this article in the Washington Post, Apple announced that developers will now have access to the Find My feature.
mm-hmm.
So right now, Find My is only you find your phone, find your, I don't know, your computer. I don't know if your Apple TV can wander off, but you can probably find that. You can find people by finding, if you know where the device is in theory. But apparently, devs given the documentation, access to the documentation to learn how they could use it, were asked to agree to a license, an additional license versus everything else they were signing up for, that prevented them from sharing the details of the spec. So someone leaked it, right? Of course, because you were told not to, so somebody leaked it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Washington Post article suggests that one part of the spec is anti-competitive, because users will have to choose which service to use, the Apple service or the dev service with Find My. So like, let's say you decide Tile is the obvious competitor here, right? They've got a finding service. So if you want to use Tile's finding service, then you can't use Find My. And the comparison they gave was like how Apple lets you use Alexa or HomeKit to control a single thermostat. You don't have to choose one or the other. You can use both.
Mm-hmm.
And that was supposed to be like some big kerfuffle, and people are all bleh about that.
Well, okay, so I will tell you, and I told you before, I got to read part of the Washington Post article, and I hate to do the media criticism thing rather than talking about what you're talking about, but man alive, you would think, the way it was written, they were like, I think something like that Apple was the giant gatekeeper keeping people out of the App Store or something. I mean, the terminology they were using was interesting, and I don't know if that was
inflammatory.
That's a good term, yeah. Because I don't know if it is just you're writing a news story and you want it to sound good. It cannot be forgotten, or maybe it shouldn't be forgotten, or maybe it should just live a little bit in the back of the mind. The Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, who is a frenemy, I think you could say, of Apple. They're not against each other right now necessarily, but they're not necessarily working together either. So
not necessarily going to give a bunch of slack.
Huh?
They're not a company that would necessarily give extra slack.
Right. Sorry, that's how much Slack has become a thing now. I started thinking, wait a minute, Amazon doesn't own Slack, or do they? Right. I don't quite understand the whole Tile thing. So is the problem that you wouldn't be using Tile's service, you would only be using Tile's hardware, and thus it is, quote, anti-competitive, end quote? Or is this Help me out a little bit more with the kerfuffle, as you say.
I don't. Well, it is a 50-page PDF that I did not read.
Yeah.
But it sounds like if you choose to use Tile's finding feature, their network of a way to find your thing, then you have to basically turn off Apple's Find My service. So the way Tile works is it's a network of devices that are all talking to each other that are reporting back. So let's say I've got a Tile in my purse and I walk past you and you're a Tile user, your phone would register, hey, that Tile was at this location at this day and time. That way, when I forget my purse or drop it in the parking lot, your Tile will tell me later where it found it. So apparently being part of that whole network of findability would be, you'd have to choose that and stop using Find My on the phone. Just like you said, remember that the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos. I can't ever read these articles without putting my own personal viewpoint on it. And I am still angry with Tile for the fact that Steve's backpack got stolen in Peru. And it had a Tile in it, and apparently the Tile's battery had died 4 months earlier, and there was no notification system for that. Oh. So that was awesome. So I like Jeff Bezos maybe wouldn't give Slack to Apple. I don't give Slack to Tile, and I'm like, oh, who cares if Tile succeeds, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot more. I wish I did know a tiny bit more about the story, because it makes sense to me that you would have to choose one or the other. I would think that Tile's argument would be they want to make sure that they can be at the table. They want to make sure that they can be one of the things that is chosen. But especially given Apple's penchant for privacy and security, they wouldn't want to just make it so that they all work together, because then there are any number of ways that different applications, different devices could be, broadcasting, or at least tracking and then broadcasting your location, and then targeting you with all kinds of stuff.
I could picture a way where I've got a Tile and an Apple, whatever they're going to call it, a discus. I don't know what the name is supposed to be, but I've got one of Apple's devices,
right,
and one of Tile's devices, both in my purse. Why can't I have both services looking for their own things? Why couldn't I have Find My looking for the Apple thing?
Right. And then some third-party app looking for the other thing, I would think. I mean, it's the problem that it just won't be able to go into the operating system fully. We don't know, do we?
Yeah.
We can keep asking each other if you want to, though. You think
49 more pages to read, but
yeah, well,
I don't know. That just struck me as an interesting thing going on. I am, as my tagline is, an ever so slight Apple bias, and it's flaming through right now all over the story, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I have that issue as well, and I worry about it a tiny bit, honestly. Like, as you and I, so as people listen to this, they were either supposed to be watching or preparing to watch Tim Cook, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and Sundar Pichai testifying before the House Subcommittee on We Hate You right now, because it benefits us to do so. And of course that got postponed because John Lewis is lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda today. I don't think they've said when that's going to happen, but the whole time I've been watching that, it's been making me crazy. The first time I read Dave Cicilline's comments about Apple, Dave Cicilline, Democratic representative who is the chairman of the I Hate You Right Now for whatever reason committee, he actually came out a while ago and said that he thought that the 30% that Apple is charging was highway robbery. And I'm thinking he's obviously never been hit up by the dandy highwaymen, because, I mean, you're choosing to go into Apple's App Store and do the 30% thing and blah, 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 whatever. So, yes, my Apple bias also comes flaming through. Talking to Tom Merritt last week, I was talking about the fact that a lot of the stuff that the EC does seems to want to protect me. I know they're saying this protecting competition. A lot of times it feels to me like they're trying to protect me from myself, because I, as a consumer, have looked at Android and I've looked at Apple, and I've decided that the Apple operating system, the Apple ecosystem, the walled garden, whatever you want to call it, is the way I want to go because of the dedication to privacy and security. And so then every time I hear somebody, especially somebody who's owned by a competitor, say, somebody really needs to look at Apple. I mean, I feel like maybe it's the fact that you've been doing your show for 15 years. I've been doing my show for 14 years. I feel like I've looked at Apple. And then when somebody says, we want to keep you from being able to do this for some reason, I'm like, oh, well, can I just go ahead and do that? And then I don't want to say caveat emptor, but at the same time, we seem to start from a place of, well, obviously these people are bad, so we got to do something before they do anything.
Remember, there's two different ways of looking at anti-competitive behavior, and people who really want facts should look this up to see if I'm making this up. But my understanding is that in Europe, they're looking out for the user, and in the United States, they're looking out for the competitors. So if something Apple does hurts Tile, then the United States would care. But the European Union would not necessarily care. But if it hurts Ken Ray, or they think it hurts Ken Ray, then they're going to be all over that with their little fingers. And I'm not saying which one is right or wrong, but they do look at those two things differently, so you won't see the same thing. But in that vein, I don't know if you heard the story that Microsoft was asked by the European Union to give them a little bit of feedback on. So you've been through this antitrust stuff. What do you think of what Apple and all these guys are doing?
I don't think that was the EU. I think that was here in the States. I think it was the same committee that Apple was supposed to sit before. Yeah.
I think for no apparent reason, or for, well, how does that go?
Yeah, something like that. I think that's. I don't think that's the official title.
Okay,
I think that's unofficial. Yeah, yeah. But that was local, and it did strike me as kind of interesting. And again, this is where I'm just. See, here's the thing. In my 20s, I thought conspiracy theory was fun. In my 30s, I kind of got over it, and now I'm deathly afraid of it, because that's actually what's guiding policy. And so when I look at things and immediately go, wait a minute, what are they really up to? I kind of feel like an idiot, and at the same time, whatever. Let's talk about something else. You want to talk about something else?
I would love to talk about something else.
All right. Man, sand is really annoying, huh?